Hi, welcome to In a Pickle Knitting. My name is Donna. This is a podcast about knitting, sewing, and other crafting. Today is Tuesday, January 26, 2021. I'm coming to you from Manassas in Virginia in the U.S. and it's been a long time, so I hope I can get through this without forgetting how to do everything and hopefully can get this uploaded. But it's been a long time and I have tried to get back into the swing of things, but it's been quite a struggle. Briefly, I'll explain towards the end, if I don't forget, as to why it was so long and everything that came in the way. But let's get started with what I have to share today, which are some works in progress, but not too many, and I'll explain why. Some finished objects, a few, our fiber-related children's literature book, and then at the end maybe I can do some updating. So to get started, I made several hats. A lot of the things that I have to show you today I actually can't show you by hand. I'm going to have to put photos up here because they were gifts and are long gone. But I will show you a couple of things that I do have. One is this hat that I knit, and this is from some Knit Picks Felici worsted wool. I bought skeins like this, bare wool, and I dyed this as self-striping and then some extra to do the cuff. So I had already done, I just did this by itself and then I did the colors that are in here. And this is what I have left. It was not all of the skein of yarn that I dyed this color. I think I dyed some gray also in case I wanted to do gray for the brim, and I used it for something else. But I liked the blue anyway. I hadn't decided just to use gray. This was not a pattern. I think I cast on 100 stitches. I do have a project page on Ravelry for it, and it will either be something that I put on to wear when I go out for a walk, or it can be a gift, or just keep for the charity bag, which I usually donate a few hats every year. So that was something that I finished. Another thing that I finished was something I was working on the last time that I was with you, and it was a shawl. So this shawl is called Straight on the Bias, and the pattern writer is Iris. Well, you can check my project page. But I believe she is the owner of Art Yarns. That is the yarn that I used for the shawl. You had to use it, in fact. It was a free pattern, but you had to purchase 2 skeins of this yarn and send a photograph of that yarn to her, and then she would send you the pattern. It was a knit along, so she sent part 1. When you finished part 1, you posted a picture of that part in her Ravelry group, and she would then send you part 2. So the shawl was broken into 2 parts. You used a size 5 needle. This yarn is a beautiful yarn. It's Merino Cloud is what it's called. It's 80% extra fine merino, 20% cashmere, so you know it feels really nice. And it is a fingering weight yarn with 437 yards in 100 grams. I have this much left over of the blue color, which was, these were gradient, but they weren't gradient in the way I would define gradient. I would define gradient as starting with one color and then over the course of the yarn blending to a new color. This actually had both colors, and actually there's 2 different colors of blue, light blue in here. You would have the white in places, so it would start off with largely with blue going lighter, but then there would be blue throughout and white throughout. The second color was this gray that had different shades of gray, and again it did the same thing. You'll see here it's light. This is the end, and it's light there, and it did start off primarily darker at the beginning, but they're still dark. You can see that's very dark, and that's very near the end too. So it's more variegated, I think, than gradient, but whatever. Now, the shawl. So let me tell you, with almost everything I ever knit, I just absolutely love it. And this is one of those projects that did not fit that rule. I enjoyed knitting it, The pattern was interesting because it had a lot of slip stitches and it never was the same over and over and over again. I like the I-cord binding. That's all the way around. This is a triangular shape. Just on a bias, it has kind of a bend to it. I like that I-cord. I loved the yarn. The yarn was beautiful to knit with. But for the finished object, I'm just not delighted, and I'll tell you why. It's because of the way the yarn was dyed. You go to a lot of work to create this design, and it's great. Isn't that pretty? It's very interesting when you have light and dark. There's contrast, but you can't control when you don't have contrast. And up here, if I get close, you might be able to see that these are rectangles here, but it really only shows when it's in the contrast, when it's the dark with the light. And there were times I had light and light together. At the beginning, I had the dark parts and the dark part together. So around about here, I think, somewhere around here, I decided to cut the yarn on one of the colors, I think the blue, and switch it. So I was working, while I had more dark here, I was working with the lighter. So probably it's actually around here where it switched from blue to white, because I realized it wasn't looking good without the contrast. But then towards the end, I couldn't control it. And this part in here in particular is really hard to see because I've got light gray with the blue and the white, and you can scarcely even see the pattern. So then it makes looking at the entire thing really odd. If you had good contrast there, if you just had two different colors of yarn throughout, you would see all of those little squares and rectangles. So I'm not pleased with that. I finished it, but I have put it down for quite a while, which has to do with, again, this is part of my story towards the end. I had to put it down. I absolutely I didn't do any knitting for a long period of time, and this was something that got put down. And does it ever happen to you where you put something down and it's really hard to pick it back up? This was like that, and the reason it was so hard is because you get in a groove of these slip stitches and following these little charts for the squares and the dots. They're called squares and dots and rectangles. So you're doing different things and in different places on every row. And coming back to something like that where I just kind of sat down expecting I was just going to pick it up the next night, and then that didn't happen. Finally got put in a bag and taken out of the room. And I didn't get back to it till January. And it's like, oh, I had to force myself because I didn't remember where I was. I didn't remember how to do it. But it did all come back to me, and actually much more quickly than I expected it would. So it's a beautiful feeling shawl. As I said, it's this long sort of triangle. So long here. And then down here where we had totally different designs. There's some garter stitch stripes throughout the pattern, but I don't actually think I'll ever wear it because, not that I wear most of my shawls, but I don't know. Guess it looks all right, but I was disappointed, and that's rarely the case. The pattern also could have been written a little bit more clearly. It was okay at the beginning. There were charts to follow, but then when it got to the big design, you were having to read line by line and also refer to little charts, and I don't know. I found it a little bit confusing. So that is my straight on the bias shawl, and that is a finished object. I have another kind of major finished object, which is my Battenberg blanket. I finished this, and I've got pieces of fabric stuck on. I could not be happier. I love this blanket. This is the pattern Battenberg blanket by Cherry Heart. I'll put a link. Hopefully I'll remember to do that. But I don't remember the size. It's a lap blanket size. So let's see here and here, and it's all scraps. And at the edge, I put several rows of single crochet, and has sort of a scalloped look, but that's because the edge of the blanket has the scalloped look, and that's just the way when I piece these together, the tops would look like that. They don't if you attach it to another. If this gets attached to another little square, it pulls the square shape, but it doesn't up here. So you can probably tell on the colored one. See how it's curved? But I like the way that looked when I thought when I did the border then it's going to look all straight. Now, okay, that'll be fine, but I actually like it that it turned out like that. It's very cozy blanket. I think it's just beautiful. I love this pattern. I could not be any happier with this. And in fact, so much so that I mentioned I was thinking about making one with worsted weight yarn. So these are 2-inch squares at a fingering weight, making them out of worsted weight yarn, and that's what I'm doing. Let me show you the squares. I'm just going to keep getting up and down because I don't have anything I can put right in front of me here. So these are my natural colored ones, and I'm using Cascade 220 Superwash Merino. Oh, Superwash. Some of the squares are Superwash Merino, and some are just Superwash. I chose that yarn because I wanted all the same yarn, and I needed a large range of colors, which I knew they had. And then I really wasn't able to find all the colors that I wanted, and I have purchased a few different kinds of yarn. So here are some of the colored squares. I have a dark green, a little bit lighter green, and then a lighter green. And I have this terracotta color, a gold. Okay, this lilac kind of color, lavender color, is Galway worsted yarn, and I don't think it's a superwash, so that's what actually I was trying to avoid mixing, but I didn't. And then there's a kind of a brown color. I'm trying to pick up the colors that are in a chair that I have because I want to hang this blanket over that chair. So I'll show you a picture here of the cushion. And some of these colors aren't exact. One color that I cannot get to match is this lighter coral color. I tried with the Cascade color, but it's just too bright. Once I crocheted it up, it came out too bright. And I also had a different terracotta. This is the Cascade, and then this is, I'm gonna have to put the name up here. I don't remember what kind of yarn this was right now off the top of my head. It's been a while since I bought it. You can see this is closer, this is just a little bright. And the same thing happened with the purple color. These two from the Cascade were just a little off of this. This is closer, but it'd be better if it was a little bit lighter. So anyway, I've made quite a few of these squares. Half of them are on the floor now, so I don't know how many. I don't remember. But I am just going to do, as I've just been doing, you know, some days 3, some days 1, some days no squares. And I don't know what crochet hook I'm using. I never do. It could be an H. I don't know. If you want to do it, just I just took some Cascade yarn that I had and pulled out a crochet hook that I thought would work and crocheted a square. I wanted 4-inch squares, and I got a 4-inch square out of it, so that's what I went with, and I don't really remember otherwise. So another finished object that I can show you is a little stuffed animal. This is a pattern that I have had for a couple of years. It is from a designer called Dunkelgrün. She's Anna Dunkelbunt, and she used to have a podcast. She is a chemist, young lady, very talented. She lives in Switzerland, I believe, and she dyes yarn, and she dyes naturally occurring yarns. That's part of her chemistry thing. She has a combination of the chemistry behind dyeing yarn, and she's a chemist. So she made a pattern called Unini the magic unicorn. And then she dyed yarns using natural dyes to make a kit where if you purchased it, when it came, you got a link to the pattern, which I printed off. I usually have to do that. And then all of the colors that you needed. So I knit up Unini. Now, Unini is a lot bigger than just from that picture. I pictured it as a smaller finished object, but I'm pleased that it's this size. Now, two things. Mine doesn't look exactly. I did not do the nose in this. You're supposed to do it in this color, and I did not do that. And that's because I wasn't looking at the cover. I just went to the directions, and it says color A. I'm thinking, just assumed he's this color, that's color A. So I started knitting and got to about here, and it says break the yarn, and I'm thinking, why are we breaking the yarn? So I go back and I look at the cover, and I thought, because you were supposed to make his nose a different color, and I just thought, I don't care. I'm just going to leave it this color. I think that's fine. I added these French knots here to give him a little bit of a nose. I used safety eyes. Now, my grandson's 5.5, and he won't pull these out, but you know safety eyes aren't really safe for little kids because you can put that in your mouth and get through it and come out and choke on it. So really, if you're making something like this for someone smaller, and she does say that in the pattern too, sew the eyes on. But I had safety eyes, and I knew they'd be okay for him. I love his little mane. She has a this was a great pattern, very well written. And there are a couple of links where she made a video to show you how to sew the legs on to the body, how to do the mane and tail. I think those two. And then you start with, that's Judy's Magic Cast On, I think, here at the nose. And I think she just gives you a link to somebody else giving directions on how to do that. It is pieced. The legs are separate. The ears are separate, and so is the horn. So you sew those on. And she suggested, where are my little pellets here? She suggested if you wanted it to have weight in the legs and that it would help it stand up. This one will stand up. You have to work at it a little bit, but he will stand up. You would use these little plastic pellets, and I have used these in other things that I've made before, so I did that. And then I just kept finding these as I was working. I just kept finding those little things on the floor, and I knew I'd spilled some, but I just couldn't imagine why I kept finding them. But let me show you what can happen if you squeeze up. Some just came out. Yes, look in my hand. They come out. Now, two problems with that. The house where this is going, there's a cat, and she would eat that, absolutely, and then probably end up with impacted intestines, and I'd have a huge vet bill for this cat. And second, it makes a mess, and then your legs are going to be empty down here, and you're not going to have enough stuffing in there. So what happened, this was all done to be given on Christmas morning. I finished it Christmas Eve and then discovered this, so I decided not to give it and to remove the legs and just stuff them. However, I discovered I forgot to do this leg. So this one still has the stuffing, so I still have to do that leg. Even though I'd already given it when I asked, may I please borrow it back to show it on the podcast, and then I'm pushing on that leg, and I thought, oh my gosh, I totally didn't do a leg. And you can tell because it's not in the same position as the other one. This is what the legs look like. This one, when I tried to take them off, I was able to get two of them off with no problem. I forgot to do this one. But one of them I could not get off. I just could not find where I had buried that yarn. I had just woven it in so many times. So I re-knit one of them. So this is just to show you the leg. Now, if you really wanted to put those pellets, you could get some muslin and sew a little like pouch, and then put them in there and sew it closed and stick that down in here, and they wouldn't come out of the muslin. But I would not suggest using the pellets with this pattern unless you did something else, and you can then not have to take legs off. and put them back on because that was not fun. But the rest of the pattern was a lot of fun. It worked up quickly. I had this much of this color left over, so she gave plenty. This much of the gray, which was only at the feet. This much for the mane and the tail. And this much, of course, I didn't do the nose this color, but there's plenty to have done a nose and still have, and I knit an extra leg from that. And this much from the horn. So lots of yarn was given there, but I don't think you can get this kit unless you're buying it from somebody else who bought it and doesn't want to make it after all. You can't get it because I don't think she's dyeing yarn anymore. I'm pretty sure she's not. And she doesn't have her podcast anymore. But the pattern is still available. And I've seen lots of them on project pages on Ravelry in totally different colors. And it is a very well written pattern. I don't know how much it costs, but she gives you pictures of how to do the processes as well as having detailed instructions. I mean, every single instruction you can see I mark off. Everything as I did, you could just mark it off as you did it. It could not have been more well laid out. So very pleased with you, Nini. That's the name that stuck. Even that was the designer's name, and it stuck as this one's name. So that's a finished knitted object. I have a couple little things. I was making some Christmas things. This is an ornament that I made, and I'll put the name of the pattern up here for you. But I will say on this pattern, this is the size ball that was recommended. I don't remember the size right now. But I had to, from the increases to the decreases was so many rows of just plain knitting. And I stuck the ball in and pulled it up as far as I could, and I thought, that's never going to make it to the top. So I added additional rows in here for the ball that I have. It might on another ball, but I'm pretty sure this was the same size. And it was really stretched to come up here to the top. This yarn is called Whoville, and I will put the yarn maker's name on the screen here for you. It's, I don't want to say it wrong. I think I know, but I don't want to say it wrong. So after making it, it's got the glass ornament inside. And I decided, you know what, if that breaks, the ornament's ruined. You couldn't put a new one back in there. So I bought some foam rubber solid ones, or styrofoam rather, styrofoam. And I'm going to do the rest. I'm going to make more. I'm going to do the rest of them like this. And when I get to the top, I will do either crochet a chain to make a hook so you can hang it, or do an I-cord chain so that you can have a hook on top instead of using the glass ornaments. But I really like that, the way that pattern turned out. And I know there's lots of other patterns that you can do that have design to them. Over on Naughty Knitwit, Michelle is knitting a lot of these, and she has some with pretty patterns on them, so I might consider do this pattern, but also do some others. There's the very bottom, which looks sort of cool. Okay, and I've also knit some socks. I've knit a lot of these before as ornaments for the tree. I did one out of that same yarn you just saw. And I always give them away. So I decided, oh, I'm going to have 25 of these. I'm going to do one every day, and I have 2. But maybe next year I only have 23 to go, if I just don't give them away. And I'll put here's the pattern up here that I used for those, but you can probably wing that. If you're a sock knitter and you knit just plain vanilla socks, you can just play around with that. I also knit some little mittens as a Christmas ornament. They're teensy tiny. I think I did them on a 00 needle. And I did use a pattern. Here it is. I made a little white pair, and this followed the pattern more where you folded down the cuff, but then I decided it doesn't need a folded down cuff, so I just adjusted the pattern a little bit. Sorry, that's moving around. But they are really tiny. Used fingering weight yarn. Do that, maybe. Nope, can't get it too close and get it focused. This is, I think this yarn had a little sparkle to it, but you can't really see it. So I made 3 sets of those, and I tied one on a package, so I kept 2 for myself. And I think knitting wise, that's all I have for finished objects, but I've done a lot of sewing. The last time we were together, I showed you a table runner I did. It was an autumn theme, and I did make the same thing out of a wall, into a wall hanging. This comes from a pattern called Autumn Splendor, and it came in 2 different colorings. I've never seen the green coloring before, but my local quilt shop, Susie's Quilts, had some of the colors for this part, and I did have to order some online. I ordered the pattern from the Fabric Addict. Is that what it's called? The Fabric Addict. And it gave complete directions and size to make a throw quilt or a wall quilt, and I did the wall quilt. I changed 1 or 2 of the fabrics. It's been so long. I finished this, it was up all of November, so I think all of November, most of November. So it's been a while since I finished it. But here's the top. I did a little something different, and they did say you could do that. I didn't do the leaves right here in this border, and I don't remember why. So that's the top, and then you have this panel in the middle, which is just a gorgeous panel with the bird and leaves. This fabric here is a gradient, so it starts, and I've made a bag out of that fabric that I sold, and it's darker down here, and then it gets lighter as it goes up. So you have to cut that fabric very specifically so that it'll fit, and I think I was limited in how much I had. Let me get up close to some of these. I did do free motion quilting. I did around all the leaves and the maple seeds and the bird. I have a different design in here, but you can't see it because I did brown thread on brown, but I did do a, I forget what I did there. Stippling maybe? And then I traced a little design here. No, I just did curly cues here. And around the leaves here. On the back, I have just this solid color, which is very fall-like. And I put a little dowel pocket across the top so that it could hang up on the wall. So I love this, and it's just been sitting here waiting to show you. Oh, I know, I finished this in October, I think, because it was up all of November till I did the Christmas decorating. Okay, so that's finished. I did some sewing of another project. I got this pattern on YouTube from Shabby Fabrics, and you go to their site. They tell you how to get there to it, and it is a pattern. It was free. You just download it, print it, and you had to cut it and tape it together to make these Christmas tree napkins. And when you open them up, then it's just a half circle red on one side and green on the other, and then they show you where to fold it. So you just fold it and you get this Christmas tree. I only had enough to make 2 of this fabric, and I wish I had more of this. This was a Christmas fabric that went with an Anne of Green Gables fabric that I had. I'd had it for a couple of years, and this is a poinsettia fabric, and I don't have any more of either of those fabrics. I think I had a fat quarter of each one. So from a fat quarter, you can get 2 napkins. And I did buy some more fabric. I only seem to have one little circle. Here's one of the pieces, and I had a green that went with the same. I had a little triangle of it sitting here, but like all things, it's gone. But I'm going to show you a picture here. I made 16 more as a Christmas gift for my sister, so hopefully I can get the picture in here. And that would have been out of, this was one of the fabrics, and a green that had just a little gold metallic dots on it. I want to make some more so that I can have a full set and give a set to my daughter. So I bought these two fabrics that I will work on hopefully for next Christmas. Have those ready. So that's another finished object. And I'm going to have to pause here so I can straighten up all this stuff and figure out what else I had to tell you. I'm going to run through a couple of the hats that I made for Christmas gifts. I've got a blue hat here along with some mittens for my grandson. Didn't use a pattern for this. No, I did. I did citrus hat pattern for this hat. And the mitten pattern is from a mitten book, so I'll put the name of that book here. It's the same mitten pattern I almost always use to make mittens for my grandson. And I did an I-cord attaching both mittens together so that they can run through the coat jacket and not be lost. Here is a green hat I made for my son-in-law that's also the citrus hat pattern. And here is another hat I made for my daughter, which is, the yarn is from Chasing Rabbits, and I will put the colorway up here and the name of the pattern. This is a pattern from a book that I had, and it's one of those 60 quick knits, and I'll show you the picture of that book. It has a cabled brim on it. So those are some things that I got finished in time for Christmas. Now here's a project that I have not given away yet, and this is a cross stitch pattern, and I don't do very much cross stitch because it's pretty hard for me to see to cross stitch. But about 30 years ago I made this little pillow. It's a tooth fairy pillow, and this was I made for my daughter, and this was from fabrics that were in the ruffle in the back are fabrics that were in her room, so I used a coordinating floss, and you put the little tooth in here, and then the tooth fairy can put coins back in there for you. So that came from this magazine called Cross Stitch and Country Crafts, and the issue is May-June 1989. And look at the price, $2.95. Can you imagine a magazine costing that? I had a subscription to this. In fact, it was so funny. I've crossed out my vital information there, but the tag is still on there, and it had my address where I live, which was just funny. But here is the pattern. It's called the Tooth Fairy, and they're showing one that has piping around it, and they do have string on theirs to hang over a doorknob, and then this one had ruffle around it. So I had used this pattern to make that one for my daughter, so now I've made one for my grandson, and he's 5½, so he'll probably start to lose some teeth soon. I made him one, and I did denim for the piping, and I put denim for the pocket, and then I used denim on the back and added another pocket. So the denim for around here, this, and the back fabric came from a pair of jeans that belong to my daughter. They're old, they don't fit, and I save jeans like that because one of these days I think I'm going to make some a denim patchwork quilt or something. I've seen so many denim projects, so I've saved them, and I used that fabric. But then I found I actually had saved a pair of my grandson's jeans for patches. I used to have to patch all of his jean knees because he would run and then slide on his knees, and they just didn't last long. So I was cutting up old jeans to put a patch and then, you know, stitch over it to hold it in place to lengthen the use of his jeans. And I found a pair that had the pocket, so I cut the pocket off here. So I thought this is nice because you can put the tooth in here, and the tooth fairy can put the money in here. So it's a bigger pocket, and also just that it was sweet that it was his jeans. So I think that, and I asked my daughter, oh, do you remember this pillow? And I took a picture of it, and she said, yes, I've been meaning to ask if you had it because I wanted to get it back and use it. And I said, well, I've made his own, and I think that's better because this looks more like a boy instead of the ruffles. I don't think he'd really, although, you know, he loves unicorns, so who knows. I think that's all I have to show you in the way of finished objects. And I cannot talk about what I'm working on at all because everything that I'm working on is being worked on for a vlog that I want to do in February. So February 1st through February 14th, 14 days, with fingers crossed. Are you only supposed to cross one? 14 days. I have planned a Valentine's short vlog where I will show a children's literature book. And keeping in mind that when I say children's literature, it's really children, because my expertise is more, even though I was library media specialist from K through 5th grade, my board certification for teaching is for primary grades. It's 3 to 8 years old. So most of my focus is and I taught 3rd grade for so many years, so we've got 8 and 9-year-olds. So the books that I like the most for specific holidays are going to be geared more that lower grade level. So mostly books in those lower elementary grade levels. I will be doing at least one book every day, and a craft, some knitting, sewing, cross-stitching, what have you, whatever I get up to. And that's what I'm working on right now, so I can't show you any of that because I'm going to show it on the vlog, and I'm calling it Vlogentines, I think. They have Vlogmas for Christmas time in month of December, and they have Vlogtober for the month of October. So and last year I did in April, I think it was end of March, beginning of April, I did Somebody Loves You as a vlog. So if you've watched those before, and not as many people watch those for sure, it'll be along the same lines. There may be some food, there is planned to be a couple of recipes and one or two crafts that are for children to do. So I'm planning that, and I just can't share what I have for you. So let's move on to our children's literature books. Since I've been doing, well, this will give a little bit away, but I've been doing a lot of quilting, so I chose this book, Tutu's Quilt of Adventure, and this is a book from Hawaii. So if you know someone who lives in Hawaii, I lived in Hawaii for a couple of years. If you know someone who lives in Hawaii, I think that they would enjoy this book. It has in the very back some pronunciations for some of the words that are in here. It has a little matching page where you can match the nickname of one of the Hawaiian islands with its name. It has pronunciation for some of the Hawaiian words that are in the story. It has a color page. So it has a little bit of extra stuff. And then finally, it has this page on the end, and it says, Mina, who is the main character, is part Hawaiian. What is your family history? And then it says a picture's worth 1,000 words. So it has a little place for children to do some activities. So the story starts off with little Mina. She has an imagination as big as a mountain, it says, and there she is. And her grandmother, who they call Tutu, means grandmother, comes to visit and has a gift for her. But when she sees the gift, she actually is so excited, and she goes, oh, it's just a smelly old quilt. And Tutu's eyes soften as she caresses the worn hand stitching. This is no ordinary kapa, which means blanket or quilt. This is my adventure quilt. And so she imparts that on to Mina, who lays down at night covered in the quilt. And then she goes so many places throughout Hawaii, and she uses her imagination in her dreams. The illustrations are very bold and beautiful. And so these are all the adventures that she goes on, and she realizes she has a gift that's very special. If you're familiar with Hawaiian quilting, the traditional Hawaiian quilting is beautiful and quite a bit different from maybe what we think of most quilts. Most of them will be made with batik fabrics, and typically only like 2 colors of high contrast colors. And the quilter cuts out a four-way symmetrical design. So if you folded a piece of paper in half and then in half again and drew out a design and cut it out and opened it up, it would have 2 lines of symmetry. And so they take that and lay it down upon the contrasting fabric and hand applique this cut fabric onto the other, and then you quilt it. So that's a traditional Hawaiian quilt, and there are modern ones as well. But quilting is something done in Hawaii. You think, oh, this nice hot place. You don't really think of needing extra warm blankets, but most people cover up at night, and a cotton quilt can feel cooling as well. And people with air conditioning on often need to be covered up. So Tutu's Quilt of Adventure. So a little bit different for our fiber. We're doing cloth today. Now, if that's, you just wanted to hear what I have been doing then with my crafting, then I'm probably done there with sharing that. But I was going to try to explain why it's been such a long time. Well, I was busy working on that shawl, and I thought, well, when I finish this shawl, then I'm going to do a podcast. And I had a few of the things that I had planned as gifts for Christmas. A couple were done, and I was working on a couple more. So I thought, okay, I'll have enough to share. And I got a phone call one Sunday afternoon. If you've been a longtime podcast watcher, you'll know that I'm a retired teacher and librarian, and I work 20 days a year. And those days I have been working for the past several years in our professional library here, which is very close to where my house. And I go in and catalog books for the online online catalog, that if a librarian in one of our schools receives or purchases a book that's not in our system yet, and they can't catalog it, the record gets sent to me, and I create the MARC record, and then the school can add their copy to that MARC record. So that's what I've been doing, and I love it because they're so nice there. And they, I was still watching my grandson, and I would have to get him at lunchtime from preschool, and they were fine with it. Leave when you gotta leave. If he's sick and you can't come, that's fine. There were times I could stay in the afternoon, whatever was fine, because there was always cataloging to be done. There was also a special cataloging project to be done, creating a special collection library. So I always had something to do, but they weren't, it all got done in a timely way, but I didn't have to be, the 9-to-5-er. So with the pandemic and schools being in a different status, our schools at the time this happened were entirely virtual. At this point, our children up to 3rd grade are back in the building 2 days a week, and it alternates the 2 days, and then 1 day's asynchronous, something like that. But at that time, it was only special needs students whose parents were okay with it, and children with speaking second language. English is their is a second language. Those most at risk were able to go into school. So it wasn't too many, but most children were being entirely virtual. And due to this, I've made this long story even longer. Due to this situation, while I'm supposed to do my work in the library, it was said you need to do what's most needed, anything you're qualified for. Well, I am qualified to teach. I taught most of my career. I was a 3rd grade teacher. So if you get a call, unless you have some scheduling issue, you need to accept, because we need to help the schools be as successful as possible. So this principal had a need for a special education teacher, and I'm also certified in special education, to do virtual. Now, Mondays are asynchronous, so it's really 4 days a week. And so the next day was Monday. I had to go to a staff meeting. I had to go to school and get a computer. I had to figure out, how am I going to do this? Where am I going to do it in my house? What materials do I have? And who are the children? So that Monday I'm receiving all their information. It was, I think, 12 students, all special needs students, and all virtual, all day. It was so much harder to teach than if you could have gone into a building and taught the students. It's not ideal at all, particularly for special needs students. Can you just imagine you're teaching the child there's spelling or in handwriting, 2 kids, and you can't see what they're doing until they hold up a little whiteboard. And by that point, if the problem is the child's reversing things or putting letters in reverse order, you need to fix it before they can do it. And so if you're watching, you say, no, now start here. Let's look at this letter. Anyway, it's horrible. Teachers are working twice as hard as they should have to work, and they already were working really hard. So I did that, and it took 6 weeks for me to finish because there were some teacher work days and election day, and all these things came up, and they wanted me to continue, but I could not do it. I could not have kept doing it. For one thing, there was a period from 12:05 until 3:30 where I sat in a chair with literally, you're finishing up with one group and the next kids are coming in, or a child is coming in. Sometimes it was just 1, sometimes 3 at a time, because this was a special needs class. It wasn't say a 4th grade classroom. And not to be able to get up and move. I have a blood clotting condition, and I cannot sit in a chair for that length of time without getting up. So I just could not do it. But that's what I had to just, finally at night when I would sit down, I had a migraine headache for 3 weeks straight because I'm not used to staring at a computer all day. I think that's what it was sitting and staring at a computer all day. So there was no way I could knit. I couldn't do anything. I just took all my craft stuff, all my projects up, and just put them in my craft room. They sat over there. In fact, there's a couple of bags still sitting there. But most of the projects got out of them. And then when I did finish, it was the day before, the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. So Wednesday, the kids didn't have school, so I was done then. But then I had to cook on Wednesday for Thanksgiving, and then it was Thanksgiving, and then immediately you're decorating for Christmas, and things were just in a whirlwind. Once Christmas was over, that's when I wanted to get that shawl out, and so I did, and I thought when I finish it, but then I got this idea for my Vlogentines, so I started working on those projects, and that's what took me so long to get back. Long story, so I hope most of you didn't stick through that because it's plenty boring. And mostly I just don't even remember how to do this, and I hope I can remember when I get downstairs to the computer how to upload it and get it edited and actually put out there, but I hope I do. I hope I still have some viewers, and I plan, I'll be seeing you if you want to join me for Vlogentines for 14 days starting February 1st, and I do have some projects. I have some already finished, some are kind of halfway, so I'll be working on those things until February 1st, and actually through the 14th, because I'll probably be working on, get the order down, the finished ones first, and be working on the others as we go. And then after that, I'll have to probably take a breather, but hopefully maybe get back into a regular routine. I don't know. I doubt it would be every 2 weeks like it started off, but maybe once a month or at least every other month that I can get back and talk with you and show you some of the stuff I've been up to. So I hope you're having a great day here in January. We have a dreary day here. It's about 36 out now, but it sleeted last night and there was ice in a lot of places. It actually looked like it had snowed, but I heard it was sleeting, and by the time I went up to bed, it had stopped, and you could see the grass, the porch, all had a little layer, looked like snow on them. But it's pretty much melted. I'm looking out there now. It looks like the streets melted. So that's what's going on here in Virginia, and I hope it's pleasant wherever you are. So thanks for joining me, and I'll see you soon. Bye.